Chapter 14. That Glass House Next Door. By 2014, the children at Sneha Children's Home had found a new preoccupation. In the evenings, after a game of football, the boys would often lie in the grass and squint up at the building, pondering the mysteries of the strange tower in their backyard. A glass house is something they could not quite get their head around, and the unknowable intrigued them, sparking their images regarding the possibilities. In the semi darkness, they spoke in quiet, speculative tones about the glass floors on which everyone treads carefully, and the bare glass walls. Because how can you hammer a nail into a glass wall to hang up a picture? What kind of people live in these strange houses? Celebrities, of course. Because everyone knows that celebrities are strange folks who do not quite cohabit the same planet as the rest of us. And who other than strange people would want to live in these strange houses? Speculation was rife in Sneha Children's Home. In anything goes, everything is valid manner. One evening, the discussion came around once more to the question that was a matter of endless debate at Sneha Children's Home. What exactly lies behind that glass exterior? I looked up at the glistening glass surface that protected the interior from the sharp eyes of the children, giving them not a hint of what lay beyond. I was in an especially churlish mood that day. My class had been a difficult one, and this only aggravated my distaste for the building. I will buy catapults for all of you, I snapped. Why don't you use them to find out for yourself? Half a dozen eyes turned to me, wide with wonder. Really? Was the question. I snapped back to my senses. No, I said. No, just joking. After a minute, the topic turned to other things and I breathed easy. I realized that I would have to watch myself. There was nothing to be gained by letting my feelings run amok. And the feelings ran pretty deep because my dislike for the house next door had not sprung up overnight. It had been building up steadily for over 2 years. In fact, ever since the construction had begun. There had not been a day of peace at Sneha Children's Home since then. Apart from the noise and dust thrown up during the construction, the rising project shook Sneha Children's Home to its very foundation. The cost of the most expensive address in Kochi included the disruption of all the young lives that passed through Sneha Children's Home thereafter. The rise of the building and its impact on Sneha Children's Home demonstrates how development often bypasses the marginalized, or worse, pushes them further into the fringes of society. Those who are socially and financially powerful are likely to have greater access to common resources, resulting in rising inequities with increased development. With the balance weighed in their favor, economic growth often provides added fuel to the upward mobility of the have a lot already. A rising tide does not necessarily lift all boats. It all began 2 years previously when the defunct factory next door began to suddenly buzz with new life. There were always cars parked in the vicinity and scores of people constantly wandering around within the complex. A few weeks of this activity and then a large hoarding appeared at the entrance, advertising the upcoming project. It promised luxury, exclusivity, indulgence, then some more luxury, yet more luxury, and finally a pledge to deliver a dream home. A dream it had to be, since the display on the hoarding showed a glittering edifice set amidst a breathtaking vista of swaying palms and flowing water. Anything that could jar the image of perfection could not exist within the landscape. So, Sneha's children's home, which stood a mere breath away, was washed away and overridden by mute, tranquil symbols of nature. Thereafter, the promise of escape from realities was complete. It would have been hilarious if the hoarding had only signified a silly fantasy, but it was emblematic of a mindset which negated the very existence of the inconvenient and the unworthy, as became apparent with the first burst of activity next door. When the first blow was struck next door, everyone at Sneha's children's home realized what they were in for. It was to be a long drawn nightmare with unceasing turbulence that would disrupt every life at Sneha's children's home. All day long, the tools drawn, whined, drilled, and hammered away. The noise levels rising to unbearable levels with the advent of heavy machinery. At the end of a 2-hour class, I would be nursing a sore throat and a throbbing headache from trying to rise above the din, not to mention the ringing in my ears. I couldn't wait to get away after my class. Even the sound of heavy traffic outside paled beside the decibel levels that the residents of Sneha's children's home had to endure. It was to be their constant companion, pervading every space and every moment of their lives. Weekdays, weekends, holidays, mornings, evenings, eating, sleeping, studying, playing, there was hardly a respite. The brain numbing, tooth loosening, pounding that haunted their waking hours sometimes crept into the quiet of the sleeping hours. Another problem was the cloud of dust that hung above the building, causing the windows in the rooms to remain closed even in the sweltering heat of summer months. The children sweated through the days and nights, the heat compounding the woes caused by the perennial racket. One of the children had taken to sleeping through my classes. All that noise gives me such a headache that I can't sleep properly at night, he said. He was groggy and hollow-eyed with sleep. Before I could respond, his head fell back on the desk and he was probably asleep before his head touched the desk. While I fumed and fretted, the children stayed true to their nature. They took it in their stride, just as they had done with everything else thus far. When the noise in the classrooms got too loud, they moved into the corridors to study. Children who were ill and couldn't sleep in the living quarters for the noise wandered out into the corridors and slept on the corridor parapets. As for the heat, they wiped off the sweat and carried on nonchalantly. On the rare occasions when the machines fell silent, it is difficult to describe the joy that pervaded the place. Shoulders relaxed, brows uncreased, and we breathed in the silence greedily. For who knew when it would slip out or freeze again? During one of my classes, when I was shouting to be heard and the children were straining forward to hear, there was a loud thump next door and then silence. We all jerked back, suddenly released from a restraining leash. Nobody spoke for the fear of shattering the fragile peace. We savored it with our ears, our minds, and our hearts. Silence was more than just golden. It was the fount from which all good things flowed: love, peace, happiness. So, we sat and grinned at each other and let the moment sink in, wanting nothing more than we had that instant. Barely had Sneha's children's home reconciled itself to this eventuality when the next blow fell. One morning, all the taps in the building ran dry. The reason was not difficult to find. In the early hours of the morning, the construction crew next door broke through the aquifer that slipped water to the whole area, including Sneha's children's home. As the water from the underground reservoir began pouring out, the water levels in the neighborhood began dropping rapidly. By the time the children began their morning routine, there was not a drop of water to be had. While Sneha's children's home was trying to come to terms with the sudden drought, next door there was a mad scramble to cope with the flooding that brought the operations to a standstill. The matter was resolved rather quickly. Storage tanks were installed immediately at Sneha's children's home, and water was brought in by tankers. The cost of water paid for by the construction company. The immediate issue was resolved, but the worry about the long-term consequences would remain till the onset of the monsoon. The monsoon would replenish the underwater reservoir, but if in the meanwhile the water from the backwaters seeped into the underground void, the water would turn salty, and this would rupture the water supply to Sneha's children's home, perhaps forever. Sneha's children's home had no alternative to provide for substantial consumption, and certainly no money to invest in an alternative system. In an alternate system. Luckily, the monsoons heralded only good things for Sneha's children's home. The rains brought relief from the heat. The construction was suspended for a while due to heavy downpour, and the restored groundwater supply was fresh and clear, with no traces of backwater contamination. A year on, there was a grand unveiling of the building. The sights and sounds of the celebration reverberated across the town, splashing onto every page 3 of every paper published in Kochi. The party went on into the wee hours of the night, spilling over into the Sneha's children's home as well. The children stood on the football ground in the glow of the lights next door, the ground under their feet vibrating with the music, and watched the festivities wide-eyed. There was breathless recounting of the events at my next class. There were more than 100 cars parked outside yesterday. Not 100. There were at least 500, maybe even 1,000. A few of the other students scoffed. I counted them. Didn't you see the whole street was full of parked cars? There was more scoffing, and then the conversation turned to the celebrities they had spotted and the size of the cars they had come in. Again, I marveled at their easy acceptance of others' good fortune. They held no grudges at being excluded from the revelry. They were content to be able to watch from the sidelines. It was I who was tearing up on their behalf. The project completed. Everyone at Sneha's children's home heaved a sigh of relief and moved on. But not really. Because there was more to come. Just as the construction next door began winding up, a crack appeared on the wall of one of the classrooms. It ran diagonally all the way from the ceiling to the floor like a long, ugly gash. The wall was plastered, and again, that should have closed the issue. But a couple of days later, the ceiling of the corridor enclosure began to rain down paint and plaster. Barely had that been dealt with when one of the study rooms began to crumble. The old building had obviously not withstood the pounding next door too well. The study was shut down. The corridor was cordoned off. The living space at Sneha Children's Home shrank by another 2 rooms. The children smiled and accepted another loss. Today, 2 years down the road, the glass building is a luminescent presence looming over the quasi skyline. Slated to be the most expensive residential address in the city, there are all kinds of figures bandied about regarding the cost of the premium condominiums in the complex. That nobody knows the real value only serves to inflate the number of zeros in the numbers being quoted. Plus, the well-publicized fact that many of the local Kochi celebrities now own homes in the building. It is a monument that is guarded with seal and maintained with care, and yet it continues to be dwarfed by the lively little dwelling next door. There is a vibrancy in the drab building that draws in people by the droves, volunteers, students, teachers, naval officers, clerics, politicians, bureaucrats. They come to participate, to learn, to teach, to observe, to report, to serve, and to celebrate. The sterility of the glass facade is exacerbated by Sneha Children's Home, where the gates are always open, the playground is always welcoming, and the air is always humming with activity. Sneha Children's Home was founded in 1974 in cooperation with the City Municipal Corporation of Kochi, its mission being to help youth at risk. Located in the heart of the city, Sneha Children's Home is home to children at risk, street children, child laborers, child beggars, unaccompanied and lost children, children in conflict with the law, abused children, abandoned children, runaways, and children from dysfunctional family environments. The gates of Sneha Children's Home open onto a huge open playing field that dwarfs the living quarters next to it. The ground is at the heart of all the activities at Sneha Children's Home, and every volunteer learns to love it as much as the children. Every evening during playtime, the children pour out into the open and throw themselves into frenzied games out in the sunshine. They roll in the grass, swing their arms about and run around in circles. The office, study rooms, bedrooms, dining room, kitchen, bathrooms, these are all located in an elongated single-story building adjoining the ground. The ground and the building are bridged by a long enclosed corridor that runs along the length of the building. The building has a high tile ceiling, and though the rooms are large and spacious, it always seems cramped with 70 odd boys under one roof. Another favorite place at Sneha's children's home is a large common hall. This is a place to watch TV, screen movies, and have dance sessions. A part of the hall has a raised platform for performances by the children or for the children, and sometimes for speeches by visiting dignitaries. As a home co-run by the Kochi Corporation, there are plenty of occasions for those too. It is frequented regularly by the mayors, legislators, and ministers. On one special occasion, there was even a visit by the Kerala Chief Minister. That visit proved to be a lucrative one of Sneha's children's home. In preparation for the visit, the Kochi Corporation spent a whole month doing up the building. The roofs of the bedrooms were repaired, and most of the building was repainted. And best of all, fancy marble tiles were fitted with the long enclosed corridor. During monsoons, the tiles were rendered dangerously slippery, and one wrong step could leave you sliding into oblivion. But the children loved it, and thereafter, the boredom of many a rainy afternoon was relieved by precarious games in the wet corridor. Attempts to stop the games were fruitless, and eventually, the center authorities threw up their hands and redirected their energies towards tending to the injuries that occurred instead. The Indian Navy, with its significant presence in Kochi, is one of the patrons of Sneha's children's home. The Navy contributes to the upkeep of the building by sprucing up the ground or giving the facade a lick of paint whenever required. Both as an institution and in individual capacities, the naval staff are a presence in the lives of children. There is also a constant stream of foreign volunteers who are more than generous with their time and money. Some of them provide financial support to the children, while some are also guardians to their sponsored child, spending quality time with their wards whenever possible. There is a yoga instructor from UK who makes annual visits. She stays for a week or two and spends time teaching yoga to the staff and children. There are local volunteers, apart from Make a Difference, who help the children with academics or teach them various skills, music, art, sports. Sneha Children's Home has its own professional band, and they have regular training and practice under the guidance of a professional. There is also professional training in judo provided to almost all the children. Children with special aptitude are given traditional training in sports and music. As a result of this exposure, most of the children are sports enthusiasts. Sneha Children's Home has a great basketball team, and the sport really caught the fancy of the children with the visit of some NBA players from USA, who then proceeded to hoop their way into the children's hearts. The Sneha Children's Home basketball team has never faced shortage of players or vanities thereafter. Many of the children have made their mark in judo, karate, and boxing, winning medals at the national level. One of them even went on to become the captain of the national junior boxing team. But all this seal pales in comparison to their one true love, movies. Movies are a deep and abiding passion, and the spin off is the addiction to cinematic music and dance. By the time a movie is released, the children know the songs by heart, and they need very little prodding to break into a dance anytime, any place. A burst of music from someone's mobile phone is trigger enough for a dance off in the corridor. Rainy days, when the children are cooped up indoors, they often relieve the tension with dancing sessions. All celebrations, whether Independence Day or the institution's anniversary, are a song and dance gala, with the children practicing enthusiastically for weeks to put up a perfect show. They are natural dancers with a good sense of rhythm and a spunky, athletic dancing style. Their special reverence is reserved for movie stars, especially dancing stars. Allu Arjun is my guru. More than one child has said this, and it was a heartfelt sentiment. They will spend every minute of their waking hours in perfecting the popular dance moves of Allu Arjun. There are similar die-hard fans of Vijay who will not only perfect his dance moves but also his dialogues from the latest Tamil movie. Sneha Children's Home is usually manned by two administrators and a couple of employees to supervise the kitchen and the children. But the numbers are nowhere near those required, not even close. However, despite the high child to adult ratio, Sneha Children's Home is a well-run institution. There are schedules and timetables for completion of course, big and small. And everyone, including the children, pays to ensure that every job is completed by the end of the day. Between school, playtime, study time and daily chores, the children have a tight 24/7 routine. Part of the reason is to keep the children busy and hence out of trouble. It works well enough, although it is debatable if lack of introspection is a very good strategy in the long run. But given the lack of resources and manpower, this is the best that can be done for now. Children grow in silences, but we are not able to provide our children with the moments of quiet in their life. an administrator once said to me. If we could have a proper library, he sighed deeply. The lament reflected his gloom at the last empty room at Sneha's children's home being converted into living quarters. Originally intended as a computer room, it had just been converted to temporarily house a dozen child laborers rescued by the police. Sneha Children's Home was never intended to house numbers over 40 and is always short of space. A library would require fresh construction and a substantial budget allocation. Considering the kind of bureaucratic tangles the center administration faces in getting funds for essential building repair and maintenance, the chances of getting government approval for a library are nil. Leaking roofs, crumbling walls, bathrooms in shambles, rectifying these are considered less than essential for children's welfare. If one were to go by government tight-fistedness in contributing funds. In these circumstances, a library can only be considered a luxury and will probably remain in the realm of fantasy for a while. But when it comes to neglect of children at risk, it is not just the governmental attitude that is at fault. Few of us can take a moral high ground on the issue because most of us have spent a lifetime walking past the problem on streets, in railway stations, at traffic signals and outside malls. The problem has continued to fester, not so much because of diabolical scheming by evil political bosses, but because of the serene indifference of the average citizen. At a TEDx in Nagpur, Gloria spoke about the enormous solution to the enormous problem. India does not just have the daunting problem with regard to childcare and development in the country. We are also lucky enough to have the quick fix. The problem and solution both lie in the numbers. While we have millions of children in need, we also have 360 million Indians who are way above the poverty line. It is a veritable army of solution designers. If each person were to bring to the table what they can, money, time, experience, talent, voice. The challenge before Make a Difference today is to rouse this sleeping giant to battle, to quiet the despair that arises from the scale of the problem, to make everyone believe that together we can. Because that is a reality. Together we can. In the post-independence era, rights and welfare of Indian children have never occupied the center stage in the country's consciousness. The mission to improve the status of children has never been undertaken. Our ignominy lies not in the failure to reach the goals, but in having never reached out to them. But postponing the matter forever is hardly a viable option, and someday we will have to confront the inevitable. The only question that remains to be answered is, if not now, then when? As for the glass house, it does make a pretty picture in the evenings, basking in the warm glow of the setting sun. It is fun to sit on the grass with the children and ponder the mysteries of life in a glass home. A world where you tread gingerly and never play catch indoors. We laugh as we picture people tiptoeing all over the place, and I feel my resentment thinning away. Someday, we will amend the development process, make it less harsh and more inclusive. Someday, construction companies will look over the wall and try to minimize the damage on the other side. For now, I no longer despair on behalf of the children. I watch them and learn to let go of all the extra baggage that will bog me down along the way.